Anything, everything. All righty, very good then. Let's continue. We're talking about why the United States got into so much economic problems after the American Revolution. And we have now come to the conclusion that it's what? It was not what was in the Treaty of Paris, it was what was not in the Treaty of Paris. And that is there was no trade agreement. Okay? Here's the deal. I mean, England is the mother country, the mother. And the colonies are the children. And the children have just rebelled against their parent. Right? They've just rebelled against mom. At the end of the rebellion, is mom going to reward the child for bad behavior? No.
No, but they moved out. That's all I know.
Yeah, but they're not going to reward us by continuing to trade with us. The only items that England will trade with us, that is export from us after the war, will be items that England could not find anywhere else or can't find it at a good price anywhere else. Otherwise, she's content to let the new country of the United States, her former colonies, rot. Okay? She's not going to buy it. She's going to go to other countries to try to make up her trade, other colonies. She has colonies in India. She has colonies in Egypt. She has colonies all around the world. She's going to go to other places to make up her shortfalls, you say. And so she's not going to reward us. She's also not going to reward us for another reason. And that is a brand new, let me rephrase that, a recently new economic philosophy called mercantilism. Now, the British developed this philosophy of mercantilism. I think we've introduced it before, maybe. Okay? And this is another reason why, right? We told you before that this is an economic theory of self-sufficiency, right? Self-independence. You're not supposed to be dependent upon any other country or territory for your economic well-being. And in fact, the flip side of it is you're supposed to get countries what? Dependent on you. And that's exactly what England's about to do to us. Okay? She won't buy except if it's something that she really, 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 really needs. I can tell you one item that she would buy from us. Okay? Well, anybody want to guess?
Sure. Tea, coal.
No, she ain't buying tea from us. That's good sarcasm. Yeah?
Tobacco.
Yeah, she might buy some tobacco from us, but not much.
Land.
Ships.
Sure.
Shipbuilding was cheaper here than building them in England. Because in order for shipbuilding to happen in England, they had to ship the wood, the lumber, back here to England, and also English labor costs were more expensive. So it was cheaper for English companies to have Americans build the ship here, no longer the big cost of shipping the materials, and the labor was cheaper, and then sail the boat back over. See? So shipbuilding was the biggest one. But here's what she did. She said, oh, yeah, we're not buying from you. Okay? But she reversed it on us. She said, we're going to sell to you, though. You want to buy from us? In fact, I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to hold a post-revolution fire sale. Yeah. We're going to host a post-revolution fire sale. In other words, the products that we brought in before the revolution, we're going to bring back to you now, and we're going to bring them back to you what? Cheaper. Right. We're going to bring it back to you cheaper. We're going to make our products cheaper for you. What is she trying to do? Right, she's getting us hooked. Okay? You want a drug analogy, this is like a junkie who's buying off a dealer. And the dealer wants to hook you. He'll sell you or even give you a sample. Then he'll sell it to you real cheap to start with. And then once you're hooked, what happens to the price?
It goes up.
It goes up, and you're dependent. You have to have it. So you'll go do anything to get the money to do this, you say. And so that's what happens here. So now, if you're the average American citizen, though, in 1784, 1785, years after the Revolution, you think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Do they have that?
Okay? You think this is the greatest thing since popcorn. Okay? Why? Okay? Why? Because look what's just happened. You had a revolution. You got rid of the British. You got rid of their taxes. You got rid of their laws. You got rid of their regulations. And now you have more products, better products than you had before, and they're cheaper. You have died and gone to heaven. You think this revolution is the greatest thing in the world that's ever happened to you. What you didn't realize is that this was just on the what? The surface. What you didn't realize that underneath the surface, the foundation was being invaded by termites. The whole house is about to what? Collapse. And I'll tell you why. What we didn't realize is that as the American businessman lost business to the British, stores closed, right? Production stopped, and those same workers who thought that this was the greatest thing since sliced bread lost their jobs. That's why, as I told you yesterday, in Philadelphia in 1788, what was the unemployment rate? 70%. Okay? So yeah, it was euphoria for a little while, and then you got that smack of reality. And you can't figure out what's going on. So, when you have trouble, especially big trouble, right? Not micro trouble, macro trouble, okay? Big trouble, a lot of trouble in a lot of places. What do? You got to get some help, right? You got to try to go find somebody to help you, okay? All right, well, let's see. The France was our best ally, okay? They were our best ally during the war, okay? So we figured, hey, this will be fine. We'll just make up the trade where? With France. Only what we found out was France did not have the type of economy that England had, and the dollar figures weren't there. So this becomes a big problem for us. In fact, France had become our best ally because during the war we had sent a very important character to France. And I mean character, okay? His name is Benjamin. Before we get to that. Senior moment, what can I tell you? Maybe that's a sign I should retire. The reason the French became allies with us was they really were not supporting us. That is, they weren't supporting our cause. They were not supporting the American Revolution. They were not supporting the concept of freedom, of our colonies free. What they wanted to see was Great Britain lose her colonies. They wanted to see a weakened Great Britain, okay? They wanted to see a Great Britain that was weak. Remember, Great Britain is the strongest power in the world at this time. So that's why she wanted to do it, you see. Absolutely wanted to do it. Now, during the war, we are going to send a representative. Who sends it? Well, you remember the Second Continental Congress? And I told you that they were meeting what? Oh yeah, off and on, okay? But they never what? They never adjourned, right? They never went out of business. Well, when the revolution begins in July of 1776, that Second Continental Congress becomes the revolutionary government of the United States. I know a lot of Americans are uncomfortable with that phraseology, but it's true. Okay? They become the revolutionary government of the United States. No legal premise for it. They just took over the country. Okay? And they sent to France, because they thought France would be our best ally, they sent this man, Benjamin Franklin, to France. Okay? They nominated Franklin to go to France.
Are they doing the same thing like the Pentagon does today?
Like who?
Like the Pentagon does today?
They were doing everything. Literally, the revolutionary government was doing everything. There was no, they didn't farm it out anywhere. They were making all the decisions about everything. Seriously. They were headquartered in Philadelphia at the time. They were making every decision for the country. So they sent Benjamin Franklin to France. And he was supposed to secure France's friendship, get France to give us money, get France to send us, help, advisors, military advisors, because France was a very powerful country at the time, not as powerful as England, obviously, but she was obviously very powerful. Franklin, he had a rough go of it at the start. When he first got to France, the French people were not necessarily eager to support the United States. Why do you think they were not eager to support the United States? I mean, Franklin talks about the fact that he went to a lot of parties, he hobnobbed with the aristocracy, he drank a lot of wine, he drank a lot of ale, but he really doesn't get any recognition. He doesn't get any formal diplomatic recognition or any kind of aid for quite some time. Why? What are the French afraid of? The French are not going to put their money and their support behind us until they can be pretty certain that we had a chance of what? Winning. Right. Why incur the wrath of England? Right? By backing the losing side.
Right.
I mean, remember, France had already gotten her teeth kicked in 4 times by the British during the colonial wars. They weren't looking for number 5. Okay? They weren't knocking on the door for number 5. That battle would come, of course, with something called the Battle of Saratoga later on. And once we win the Battle of Saratoga, then the French say, okay, that was 1778. They say, oh, you got a chance of winning. Okay. And they support them. Okay? By the way, Franklin was quite a character. There were, besides as a printer and a writer and an editor and a statesman, the 2 most favorite things he liked to do in his life. Anybody know them? 2, he did invent a few things, but what was his 2 favorite things to do in life? Who knows? Drink beer and chase women. Okay? And he really did like to chase women and drink beer. Now, we know, and the 2 went hand in hand with each other for him. Okay? I mean, if you read, how many of you ever read Poor Richard's Almanac, which is written by Benjamin Franklin? Okay? In Poor Richard's Almanac, he talks about the workers of the colonies. This was written in the colonial time, and he demanded in his writings that the workers be given a half-hour break in the morning and a half-hour break in the afternoon, so that they could go home and have sex with their wives. Because his argument, and he talks about this in his autobiography. His argument was that if a worker is not allowed this privilege to have sex with his wife, okay, get some time off during the day, he's too tired when he comes home from work.
So he gets half an hour.
So he called them sex breaks. See, after work, he argued you should go to the tavern and unwind with beer. And then by the time you came home, you were worthless anyway. No wonder you were too tired. You were exercising your elbow, True story. You have to read the unabridged version, though. The one they sell you in school doesn't have that in there. You have to read the unabridged version, the longer version. Okay?
What is it, the half hour before work and work?
No, a half hour during the morning and a half hour in the afternoon. See? And remember, you worked pretty close to where you lived. Everything was within a walking city. So he said, and he called them sex breaks. You had to have sex breaks. Okay? Smart man.
You had like 12 wives or something?
No, he didn't have 12 wives. Now, you're getting him mixed up with Brigham Young, the leader of the Mormon. No, but what we do know about him is, ready for this? Franklin, it is purported that he fathered over 70 children.
Well, obviously.
Okay? Most of them overseas.
Well, I wonder why.
Okay? There's a lot of Franklins out there. Okay? All right? Okay? And the only thing you can say about him is at least he practiced what he preached. Okay? You got to give him his credit. Okay? He did practice what he preached.
Wait, what did he preach? I think I missed.
Yeah.
You missed it. He fathered over 70 children. Yeah. Okay? And most of them overseas and most of them illegitimate. Your sister's last name is might have a claim. Test that DNA. Now, that same revolutionary government would send John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay to negotiate that peace treaty that I talked about to you yesterday. I kind of gave you a tip about this, didn't I? And remember, what did the British Prime Minister say to his negotiators? Give them what?
Anything they want.
Anything they wanted. And so we could have had
Canada.
have had Canada had we wanted it. We just didn't what?
Ask.
Well, we just didn't ask for it, okay? So Adams, Franklin, and Jay are our negotiators. All three are going to become very important figures in the future history of the United States of America, okay? And again, they go in there and negotiate. They have that whole thing about the language. Remember I talked about yesterday, the terminology of the first phrase, right?
Oh, yeah.
Whether it be 13 colonies or the United States of America, they insisted on the United States of America. Franklin was the biggest one about this. He said, we're not doing anything until we get this one straightened out. And again, Canada was a big issue. If we would have asked for it, we would have had it. We would have Canadians as Americans at this point.
Did they ask for trade?
No. Did they ask for Canada?
No, for trade.
To trade. Interesting. They did ask for trade. And the British said what?
No.
No, because that was one of the non-negotiable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Had we probably pushed harder and said we wouldn't do a treaty without trade, we might still be at war today. Okay, I mean, they weren't going to give it to us because that was against their that was against their economic philosophy. They weren't going to do anything against themselves. Okay, now we all know that date, July what? 4th, what? 1776. So if I was to tell you to take a survey, go out on the campus when it's drier, go out on the campus, do a survey, and ask people to see if they can give us an association, right? Word association or date association. You ask them July 4, 1776, what do we expect most of them would tell us? Declaration of Independence, right? Or what? Independence Day. They might talk about Will Smith in a movie. I don't know. You never know. It's a stupid movie. Very stupid movie, actually. Yeah. Welcome to Earth. When he punches the alley girl. So if we ask the follow-up question, right, we asked the first question. Now we ask a follow-up question. July 8th, 1776. What do we get? You got one thing on your mind. Maybe two. I don't know. Okay, so July 8th, 1776. You'd have the exact reaction. They would know. But not 4 years, not 4 months, not 4 weeks, but 4 days after we read the Declaration of Independence publicly, right? We talked about that, right? Delivered to the British, right? We begin work on the first Constitution of the United States. And that first Constitution is called, what? Who's got it? You know it.
The articles.
Yeah, you should be ready for Tuesday's exam. You better know it. The Articles of Confederation. They begin writing it on July 8th, 1776. The same men who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Sorry, ladies, you weren't invited to the party. Okay. In the same building, the old Pennsylvania State House, in the same room. Okay. When you come in through the back door, which is the public entrance, first room on the right. Okay, still there today. Some of the original furniture is still there today. The room is set up exactly like it was when this happened. The original desk that the Declaration of Independence was signed on, and the Articles of Confederation was signed on, is sitting right in front of you. You can't sit at it, it's roped off. But you can sit in some of the original chairs that the delegates would have sat in, you see. It's a very cool experience if you're into that kind of stuff, okay? They begin writing the first Constitution of the United States. Now, it takes several months to write it, okay? It won't be finished until November 1776, okay? I think it was right around the middle of November. I want to say November 13th, for some reason it sticks out of my head. But don't quote me on that. I'll have to check it, okay? It's done, okay? And it establishes the first real true Constitution. So there's an important point to be made here, besides the details we're going to go into. America has always been and remains a legalistic country. It believes in the rule of law. For these men who just started a revolution, who have enough on their minds about fighting a war, okay? who have enough on their minds about trying to get allies and help, and yet one of the first things they commit to is to writing what? A constitution. That tells you something, okay? That tells you that they are committed to the rule of law. They did not want a lawless society. They wanted a society of law. Now, in the title of the document, the Articles of Confederation, there is a clue there as to what type of government we're going to establish right away. Okay? What's the clue?
Confederation.
That's right. We establish a confederation government. This has nothing to do with the Confederacy of the Civil War. Okay? This is a governmental. Okay? So what is a confederation? A confederation government is when you have a national government that has limited powers, and the majority of the powers lies in the sovereign states. So you have a national government with very limited power, and the majority of the power is in the hands of the sovereign states. Okay, got it? So of course the central power is limited, or the national power is limited, therefore it doesn't have a lot to do. Right? And I'll tell you exactly how that government worked in just a second. So what's the opposite of a confederation government? Well, no, this is a democracy, believe it or not. This might even be true democracy. We have a representation. The opposite is a federation government, or what we call pro-federation, right? It's called a pro-federation government, but it's very popular now. We dropped the pronoun pro. We just call it what? Federation, right? We don't call it pro-federation. Okay? So the opposite of confederation government is a pro-federation government. Drop the pro, drop the pronoun, okay? And it is literally the complete opposite of what a confederation government would be. So, what's the central powers now? If the last one were limited, this one is what? Very powerful. Okay? The central government is very powerful, and then whatever's kind of left over goes to where? To the states. It's what we have today.
Is that a dictatorship?
No, it's what we have today in the United States. We are a federation government. That's why we call it the federal government. Okay? There's a reason. Okay? Okay, got it? The word federalist, which you're familiar with, all from the roots, right? So anybody not understand this? Because this is important to know as we go forward, otherwise nothing else is going to make sense to you. Okay? Everybody understands the difference, the confederation versus the pro-federation, right? So we're like you know, so what's the opposite of con? Pro. So what's the opposite of Congress? Just a little political humor. Just to wake you up in the morning. Right? Just a little political humor, right? I mean, come on, they don't move very quick, right? We don't see any progress, right? All right, I got you. It's a good joke, you know, that was fun. Yeah, I mean, I'm into words. I have some crazy phobias of mine, which I'm not afraid of much, but I have some crazy OCD stuff too. I'm not OCD totally, but some things, like chairs. Okay, those of you who had me before know chairs drive me nuts. They have to be in line, and they have to have, I haven't been too much in this classroom because the chairs got smaller as we got into the classroom. So it's not a big problem for me. But if I walk into a room or an arena, and I look out there, I have to see a pattern. I'm looking for the patterns. Why are the yellows here and the blues here, and how come? And there's a red every 3. I got to figure out what the pattern is. And I'm a counter. I have to go in and count immediately. It drives me crazy if I can't figure out the pattern. I mean, I will obsess on the pattern. You see, to the point where I'm missing the show. I'm just obsessing. It's a great basketball game you're missing. I don't care. I'm going to get this pattern.
I think that's just OCD, not a little.
Yeah, well, I'm there. Yeah. I agree. For that, anyway. But I love language. And words especially. I love words. And so I'm always curious. Why do you drive on a parkway and park on a driveway?
Yeah, that's always been.
What the hell is that all?
Wow.
I mean, why do you drive on a parkway and park on a driveway? I mean, wouldn't it make sense to park on a parkway and drive on a driveway? Right? What the hell's that all about? Right? So these are the kind of things that keep me up at night. I wonder who did that? Who made that? It's not easy. Okay? You wonder who did all that. So what kind of government? They established the Federation government. So that we had a unicameral legislature. What does the word unicameral mean?
One house.
One house, right. It was one body. A unicameral legislature, as opposed to a bicameral, which is two. Unicameral, one legislature. So we didn't have a Senate and a House. We just had a Congress. Got it? One body. And each state had equal representation in that Congress. Okay? Each state had equal representation. In this case, each of them had 2 votes. Now, you could have 20 representatives. It didn't matter. But you only got what? 2 votes. Okay? So you have to decide, amongst yourselves how you want to vote, and then that was the vote. That's your state. It didn't matter if you were a big state or a little state. It didn't matter if you had a lot of population or a small population. You had the same amount of votes. That's why some people will say this was a true democracy, okay? As opposed to a representative democracy with the more people you have in your state, the more votes you get, you see. Okay? So that's exactly what happens. We have Articles of Confederation, everything is in Congress's hand, and Congress literally does everything. Now, let me tell you that when you look at the Articles of Confederation, though, I want to point out a few more things to you. One, when was it passed? All right, what has already started?
Revolution.
Right, all right, the revolution has already started, even though it's 4 days. Okay, so you have to look at this as a wartime document. Okay? Everything you look about, anytime you look at the Articles of Confederation, you have to understand it in the terms of a wartime document. Okay? And what's the goal to do any war, in any war? Win. And that's the only thing that matters. So do you think when the Founding Fathers put the Articles of Confederation together, do you think they were thinking about all the future complexities and problems that might arise in the United States in the future?
No.
None. They were thinking about a war, and they were thinking about winning a war. And they would fix whatever happened later, you see. And, consequently, they do establish this limited government. Now, why do you think they established a limited central government?
Because they didn't want the same thing to happen in Britain to happen here.
100% correct. It was the only thing they could have established, okay? Because they just broke away from a country that had strong what?
Government.
Central government. The parliament was very powerful. It had a king. No wonder we didn't have a president to start with. We didn't want to have, right, one figure. In other words, the Articles of Confederation was a reactionary document. We were reacting, right, to what we had just previously experienced under the British. No way were we going to establish anything that looked like the British. If we were, then why the hell did we break away? We might as well have just stayed what? Under the British, you say. We might as well have stayed under the British. So there's no way we're going to go back and establish this. So that explains why the Articles of Confederation are what they are. Okay? However, as conditions in the United States worsened after the war, okay, and very briefly, let me tell you that it took 5 years for all 13 states to ratify the Articles of Confederation. They will not be ratified until 1781. However, what the 13 states decided was that even though it might take a long time to ratify it, as soon as it was finished in November of 1776, we're going to live under it. And if for some reason it doesn't get ratified, then we'll do away with it. So we implemented it before it was totally what? Ratified. Okay? We implemented it before it was totally ratified, and that actually was smart. That was very smart. One thing that they did put into the Articles of Confederation was an amending process, so that we could come back later and fix it after the war. Again, we're not thinking about all the complexities of the future, you say.
You said it was ratified in 1781?
It was. But there's a little quirk in the ratification, in the amendment process. In order to amend an article to the Articles of Confederation, to add to it, you had to have all 13 states agree. It had to be unanimous. Okay? So keep that in mind.
So if one disagreed, then they can do it.
One state said no, it doesn't become a part of the Constitution. Correct. This is under the Articles of Confederation. This is truly equality. So as the country gets into problems after the war, and what kind of problems do we know that they got into specifically? Economic problems, right? There was a group of people who began to uprise because they want the national government to help them. The problem was the national government under the Articles had what? Limited power. It couldn't help them. In other words, when we have trouble, right, in society, we turn to government for help. Right? If you got in your street, right, all of a sudden there's a pothole, do you go out there with sand and dirt and fill it in, and you go out there and buy tar and fill it in? No. What do? You call the local government and say, hey, darn it, there's a pothole. And it's getting bigger, okay? We're already losing children in it, you're saying. Soon we're going to lose cars in it, you're saying. Maybe some of us want to lose children in it, I don't know. So the opponents began to challenge the Articles of Confederation, and they actually began to call them weak. Those people who began to be against the Articles of Confederation became known as Federalists. And it makes perfect sense why they called themselves Federalists. Because what kind of government did they want?
Federal.
A federation government, right? They wanted to change this government around from a limited central power to a strong central power. They wanted to change the nature of the government. Now, here's the catch. Who were the Federalists? They were the merchants and the plantation owners. Now, this seems to be very interesting to us because we've seen these two groups again before, haven't we? Who were these guys? How do we know them? What relation?
Religion.
They were?
Leaders.
They were right. They were the leaders of the revolution. They were not only the leaders of the revolution, they were successful leaders of the revolution, because we had a revolution. You have to, of course, understand, they were members of the Second Continental Congress. No, poor people weren't there. Okay. Guys like you and I weren't there. Okay. They became the leaders of the revolutionary government. And they probably got elected to the Confederation government. Right? They were also the ones who had the highest expectations, and they probably weren't met, especially by 1788, right? Okay? So they want to change, they want to undo the whole thing. They are the ones who brought us the Articles of Confederation. They are the ones who wrote the Articles of Confederation, and now they don't like them anymore. So now they want to what? They want to change them. You're saying. They want to change them. They want to change them because their own expectations were not met. And so they began to clamor for this change. Right? So when the Federalists were arguing and complaining about the government, they were actually complaining what? About themselves. Because they were the government. You see, the problem was that the general population in 1784 and 1785 and 6 and 7, they weren't smart enough to figure this out. Because back then, people didn't know how the government worked. In fact, I would go on record today and say
The same thing, right now.
2013, people don't know how the government works. We have this unrealistic, unbelievable, we don't know how this thing works, okay? So, it is rather fascinating when you think about it. The more things change, the more they stay the same sometimes, right? So they didn't understand this, so when they're making this big noise, people don't realize that they're yelling about themselves. Okay? They're trying to change this, and they're complaining about themselves. Now, the only way they were going to get this done, though, was they were going to have to what? Convince bunch of you to come on board. It's the same story that we had before and during the revolution. They're going to have to convince you to come on board. Okay? Now, they couldn't go back to the people after they pulled off this revolution and go, hey folks, here's some news. It didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to work out. We didn't make enough money for ourselves. So now we need your help to undo all this and put it in a new system that would help us. Come on, you with us? And once again, you would probably tell them to take a very long walk off a very short pier. Right? There's no way we would support anything like this. So the Federalists had to do a couple of things. They had to put some propaganda out there to make us think that this was in whose interest? Our interest.
Yeah.
Not, they're being the citizens' interest. Okay? They had to put it out there, making it think that it's in your interest, when if you looked hard enough, it wasn't. All right? And I have to tell you that I always wondered, even today in 2013, why people would vote against their own economic interests. And many do. Okay? So, before you vote, figure out where you fit in the equation. Okay? And then you might be surprised that this ain't going to help you. Okay? And not only did they have to convince us of that, right? They convinced us that it was in our interest, but we had to convince that there were problems in society, unsolvable problems that the government couldn't change. So we have to change the what? If the current government can't fix the problems, what's the solution?
Change the government.
Change the government, right? We do that all the time, right? We have problems, right? We've come to believe that the president and the Congress can't fix it. We go to the polls and we what? We change them. And then they still can't fix it, so 4 years change them again. Seems like they never get fixed. Question?
Why did they have to convince the people if the farmers and the merchants were representing states and they could just vote on it?
Yeah, that's a good question. But they were representing states, but eventually if these problems were not solved, you might have a counter-revolution. You might have an uprising. You might have the poor uprising against the rich, something that's never happened in this country. We've never had social class warfare. But if we didn't fix this, you might have social class warfare. See, that's the difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Okay? Right? You remember the French Revolution. The French Revolution was poor people versus rich people. It wasn't a colony versus its mother country, despite the fact that Thomas Jefferson thought it was. And Mr. Jefferson was wrong. Okay? The more you look into the French Revolution, you realize it was actually it was the poor versus the rich. That's what Dickens wrote about, A Tale of Two Cities, the opening line. It was the best of times, the worst of times. That's the tale of two cities, in London and France during the French Revolution. When the English, who hate the French, invite all of the French aristocracy to come and live in England with the English aristocracy. Because even though they hated the French, they hated the peasants worse. See, they weren't going to let the peasants take over France. They were going to help the aristocracy of France. And then they go back to hating France again. Okay? But always right in the kingdom. Always right in the kingdom, you see. Actually, Napoleon won. Napoleon became a dictator. They threw Napoleon. The British came in and threw Napoleon out. And so, really, the winners were the people in the long run. Because they did establish a republic after they got rid of Napoleon. But what happened was because of the upheaval, this dictator was able to take over the country, promising world domination. That's the whole story.
I have a question. Would you say like the French Revolution, American Revolution, Russian Revolution, all these revolutions, India have the same thing in common?
There are some elements of commonality, and I'll reference you to a book, a very good book you can read about this. The book is entitled, it's by Clinton, it's by, last name is, his first name is Crane, believe it or not, Crane Britton, B-R-I, and he actually spells it T-T. Crane Britton, and the name of the book is called The Anatomy of Revolution. And he actually compares the American, French, Russian revolutions and goes through those commonalities. There are some common elements, yes, but they're not specific, they're not revolution specific. So they got to come up with a way to do this. So first they have to decide on what the problems are. We have to tell us what the problems are. So the leaders of the Federalist Party, okay, the Federalist group, decide to call for a convention. Okay, oh, by the way, the opponents, you already know this, though, right? They were what? Anti-Federalists, right? They wanted to keep it what?
Same way.
Yeah, they wanted to keep the articles, right? They just wanted to fix them, right? They want to keep it decentralized. If you haven't read about that, you're not ready for one of the essay questions on Tuesday. All right. The Annapolis, they call a convention for Annapolis, Maryland. Okay?
This is by the hand.
These are the Federalists. No, these are the Federalists. The Anti-Federalists, they don't even want to hear any of this stuff. Annapolis, Maryland becomes the place where the convention is held. And at Annapolis, the purpose of the Annapolis Convention was to discuss the problems with the Articles of Confederation and how we can actually amend those articles, okay? So the whole purpose was to talk about the problems, okay, and then figure out how we can fix them. The convention meets for some time, but when they're finished meeting, they have their final session together. All the delegates are in the same room. It becomes pretty clear that they're really not going to be able to do much here. Why? How many states were there now? 13. How many show up to the Annapolis Convention? 5.
They have to have all 13.
No, they really didn't need all 13, but they certainly couldn't do this with 5. Okay? So rather than make any suggestions or do anything about the articles at this particular moment, they decide to do the following. They decide to call for another convention. So they approved another convention, and the purpose of the new convention would be to revise the Articles of Confederation, and it would be advertised as so, and hopefully they'll get more people